Today, on Home Theater Fanatics, we're going to take a look at the Act 4 processor from Acurus. If you remember, not too long ago, I reviewed the Acurus Muse 16-channel processor. This is a wonderful unit, and you can find my review up in the top right-hand corner. What you might not know, though, is that Acurus also produces a step-up model from the Muse called the Act 4. This is their flagship processor, and it's capable of 20 total channels of output. This is what we're going to take a look at in depth today. Also, I'm going to throw up a few demo scenes later in the video so you can get a feel for what this processor is doing on a 127-inch 2.35:1 anamorphic screen. Yeah, that's a scope screen. It's also got a 9.4.4 sound system in support with all that Atmos goodness. Now that's a great looking unit. To get started, let's talk a little bit about pre-pros. Now that's a preamp processor, or just a processor for short, versus AVRs. And AVR is an audio video receiver, like I said, AVR for short. The primary difference between these two animals is that an AVR includes some level of amplification, where a processor does not. The processor just focuses on the processing of the audio and the video from your source devices. What this really means is that a processor is going to have some amount of RCA or XLR outputs on the back, really for all the channels, whereas an AVR might not have those. You can find that on some of the higher end models, but it is not a common accessory across all of the AVR levels of quality. Now, when you start out at the low end of processors, dedicated processors, you'll have RCA cable connections, and as you move up, you'll move into the XLR connectivity level. The Act 4 is the top tier processor from Acurus, so it's got all the bells and whistles, it's got XLR for everything, and this unit competes against the likes of Trinnov and Storm. There's a full spate of connectivity on the back, and we'll talk about all of that in just a minute. Now that we know what a processor is versus an AVR, it's time to take a look inside the Act 4 box. But before we do that, let's take a moment so that you can subscribe to the channel. Please click like, ring the bell, do all those things that everybody asks you to, because it's super important for the channel. I'd also love to hear what you think about this and maybe some other Acurus products, so please leave a comment down below. But with that, let's go ahead and crack the box open and take a look and see what this thing actually looks like. Packaging for the Act 4 is really simple. There are only 4 things inside of the box. You're going to have the instructions, you're going to have a remote control, and this is kind of a generic universal remote control that I don't think anybody actually uses, but it can be useful for setup, but most everybody has some type of control system or universal remote control that they use to control this system. Beyond that, you've got the power cable, and then you actually have the Acurus unit itself. Now let's talk about the core features of the unit. First and foremost is Dolby Atmos decoding. This unit supports up to 15.1 channels, and you'll usually see that as 9.1.6. So you're asking yourself, what are those last 4 channels for? Well, what this unit does is it will allow you to copy any of those other 15.1 channels onto those 4 other channels. On the DTS side of the house, the unit supports 11.1 decoding. There's a number of different post-processing modes that you can engage. There's a Dolby Surround Up Mixer, Neural X Up Mixer. You can do Auto Direct, Party, Night, Stereo, DTS, Dolby. So you can really customize how you want to listen to your sound. I've even used this in 2-channel mode and 2.1 channel mode just for fun to see what would happen. For video, pretty much anything that's 4K will pass through this unit. So that's all of the different flavors of HDR. This unit actually doesn't do anything to the video at all except pass it. So your video support is really going to be dependent on your display device. 2 other noteworthy items are that the unit includes a 5-year warranty, and I believe that warranty gets reset if you ever send this unit into the factory to have some type of upgrade done. And also, these units are built in the United States, so it's a great product to support built in the USA. Now let's take a closer look at the processor. The unit's dimensions are 7 inches tall, 17 inches wide, and 15 inches deep, and it's got an all-metal chassis. The MSRP is somewhere around $13,000, but you'll want to check with your dealer as that price changes at I think that's right, but don't quote me on that one. The front of the unit is very elegant. There's a power button, a 7-inch touchscreen, and then the volume knob. This knob isn't available on the Muse, and it's only available on this upgraded Act 4. I think it's a really nice touch for this step-up unit. The touchscreen is where the secret sauce of this whole thing is, and we'll get into that after we get this unit installed. Now, the unit we have is designed to sit on a shelf, but rack mount ears are available if you want that perfectly flat and seamless rack install. On the back of the unit is where we find all of the action. Across the top, there are 8 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs. These are 2.1 ready, meaning that you can firmware update these to the 2.1 specification with the exception of one of the outputs. Only one of those is 2.1 upgradable. Filling out the rest of the inputs are a phono input, 3 coax and 3 optical inputs, a 7.1 analog multi-channel in, 3 RCA ins, and a set of XLR ins. On the output side of the house, you get a total of 20 XLR outputs and 18 RCA outputs, so you can go either way on that just depending on what kind of equipment you have downstream. In addition to all of this, there's an IR and 12 volt trigger input, 4 12 volt output triggers, and that's really cool because you can connect a bunch of amps and other things and have that stuff all turn on as this unit is activated. There's a USB for firmware updates as well as 2 USBs dedicated for external component power. There's an Ethernet slot, RS-232 for control, and also the power slot. The Ethernet connection allows for remote control integration from things like Control4 and other third-party tools, but it also grants you access to the onboard web server so that you can access a web page for device control, and you can do this from a cell phone or tablet. Now that you know about the speeds and feeds, let's take a look at what it takes to get this installed in my rack. Now let's take a quick look at installation. I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but you can see that I use XLR connections. Outside of that, all I really need to connect to this unit are the HDMI ins and outs, the IR trigger, and the Ethernet. Now let's jump into the touchscreen. This is really what's cool about this unit. I love this thing. So in the top left, you've got your input selector, and you can change to all the different inputs that you have on the back of the unit, all your HDMIs, digitals, analogs, etc. We'll go ahead and stay on 3 and go back to the front screen. In the middle, you have your volume. You can control that through a number of different ways, but you can also use the nice little dial here on the side. And then here on the right, it shows the type of input you have. And as you can see, we've got Dolby 944 input being used in this unit. You can see the bed channels in the outside ring, the Atmos, and then the subwoofers up at the top. Now, where things get really interesting is here in the settings menu, and we'll run through this stuff. First up in the settings menu is the settings for your speakers. This allows you to choose the format for your surround. So I've got basically everything turned on. Your number of subs, your bed channels, your height channels, or your Atmos channels. You can move on from there. This screen allows you to tune each individual channel of your environment. So you select your speaker here, and then on the left-hand side, you can select the delay level, your polarity, your size, whether small or large, which affects the crossover, and what that crossover is. On the right-hand side, you can feed different types of tones to your speakers for different kind of testing. Now, this is all simply for a manual setup. There's a tool called Aspect, which we will review in the near future, that does all of this automatically. Moving on from here, you get to the point where you're dealing with your crossover as well as your PEQ. Now we'll go back home and go to the second selection. This screen allows you to select between Dolby and DTS as well as your layout. Here you can control your lip sync delay as well as your signal format. These are specific Dolby Atmos controls. Similarly, this is your DTS control. These are volume settings where you can control your max volume, ADC sample size, and your input mode. Here you control your triggers. So if you want triggers to activate at different times, you can manage that, as well as your IR. This is your front panel brightness control. You can set the brightness as well as the timeout time frame. This screen shows your firmware version. This screen shows your IP address and also allows you to select between DHCP and static IP settings. And last but not least, this is where you would do your factory reset if that's ever needed. Now let's get started by checking out some demo scenes. Now recognize that you're going to be listening to this through your pad and you won't have the full experience by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of cool because it'll kind of let you know what's going on. So we're using Kaleidoscape, and we're going to start out with some scenes from John Wick 3, Parabellum. This is a great movie, love it, great effects, sounds wonderful, one of my favorites. So as I said, we're using Kaleidoscape for this, and they pick out some scenes for us to make it easy. So let's go down to John versus Zero here at the very end and watch a few seconds of this.
Let's do this.
Now let's jump over to Monster Hunter and see what's good here.
Any second now.
And finally, let's take a look at the little old school blade. At this point, we have a really good view into the Acurus Act 4, and I must say that I am super impressed. Video quality is outstanding, and the audio is in a different league compared to the vast majority of all AVRs I've heard in the past. Performance is on the same level as far as audio and video go with the Muse, but the Act 4 provides a broader set of capabilities to support larger installations. One item we didn't get deep into in this video is the tuning of the unit. The reason for that is that Acurus has just released their new auto EQ tool called Aspect, and that's spelled A-S-P-E-Q-T, right? Okay. This tool is the next level and should directly compete with Trenov and Dirac. We'll check this out on a future video and we'll see exactly how good it is, but that'll be down the line when I get my hands on a unit. I hope this video was a good introduction to you for the Act 4. You know, drop a comment down below and let me know what you think, and let me know if this is something that you might be interested in. Like I said, I am completely blown away by this unit. I love it. It sounds and looks wonderful in my theater. And with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Thanks for watching, and remember, I'll see you in the next video.